with talking about outliers, that's the first thing we'll talk about. Oops. So first things first, always when you guys are taking your notes, make sure to put the date on there because I'm going to be posting the videos this year, which is something I haven't done in the past. But if you get stuck on something and you have the date written down, you can go back and access the video. So it's always a good way to do it. But if you don't have the date written down, you won't know which day we did this lesson. Okay, so definition of outliers, Tanner nailed it. It's going to be extreme data values. Okay, or the result of errors. So it is possible sometimes when you're collecting data that you write something down incorrectly, but it's not always that case. Oops, I should say result of errors. There we go. Okay. And outliers specifically, they're going to affect one type of center more so than the others. Does anyone know from your warm-up which type of center seem to be affected by the outliers? The mean, exactly. So notice that the median, you're counting to the very middle number. So it really doesn't matter how far out an outlier is. The mode, you're just looking for the highest frequency. So it's really the mean that gets affected negatively. So outliers can affect the mean. By making it larger or smaller. And they most likely don't affect the median or mode. If there's enough information to affect the median or mode, then you're not really dealing with an outlier, you're probably dealing with some accurate data. Okay, so that's the idea for outliers. We didn't really talk about that one yesterday, but that's it. Okay. Next thing I did today was I really liked a lot of the way your book explains things. And there's some things I don't like how they explain it. But anyway, let's start with standard deviation. So it's called a measure of dispersion. That's what standard deviation is. And they just spread out a data set. Before we even get to standard deviation, I guess, the simplest measure of dispersion is the range. And the range is literally when you just do the maximum value minus the minimum value. So max minus min, that's when you're finding the range. What's the highest number? What's the lowest number? Subtract them. That's the range of all your values. Okay. Standard deviation is going to be represented by this weird little symbol here. Okay. And that's how we're going to represent standard deviation. So you have to know what that looks like. Okay. You'll see that on the IB exam if you're planning on taking it this spring. You will have to see that thing. Standard deviation is also known as the root mean squared deviation, which is a very weird name, but it's root mean squared deviation because that's kind of explaining how you find the standard deviation. And if you're looking at this formula, it looks really scary, right? It kind of reminds me of binomial theorem from last year because we have that summation symbol there, that sigma. But honestly, it's not terrible. It's not bad. And we are going to practice with the standard deviation right now, actually. So what I want you guys to do, oops, gotta zoom out. I have this investigation here, again, from your textbook. Investigation number 4. It has 10 questions. With 1 mark for each correct answer. So 10 boys and 10 girls took the test. So this is their test results. All right. What we're going to do is we're going to find the mean of the girls' scores and the mean of the boys' scores, and then we're going to find the standard deviation of those scores. So first, I want you guys to go ahead and calculate your means of the girls' scores and the boys' scores, and then go ahead and give me a thumbs up when you calculate the mean of those two scores. And then we'll work on the standard deviation together. Okay. All right, so we're just filling out our table. Hopefully you guys are pretty close. So whenever you're doing standard deviation, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit here. You're going to first subtract each individual score from the mean, and then you're going to square those scores. I should actually highlight this. So I'm going to highlight the girls in blue, and then the boys in black, just to stay consistent with the other side. I should have done it in black ink, but that's okay. Okay, and then the next step is where the summation comes in. So that's why it has a summation symbol at the bottom. Add the entire blue column together and get yourself a number at the bottom there. And then add the entire black column together and get yourself a number for the boys. All right. Am I going too fast, or are we doing okay, guys? We're doing okay? Yeah? All right, good. Just making sure. All right. So the instructions here I think are pretty good because it says first find the deviation of each score from the mean, then square these answers. That's right above the table. And then right below the table, next you have to find the mean of the girls' scores minus the boys' girls' mean squared, and the boys' scores minus the boys' mean squared. I really like that. But now it says, lastly, you find the square root of each of these two values. But if I'm looking up here at the equation, there's one thing we didn't do before we square rooted. We didn't do this. That's not included here. And that's one thing I don't like about the book, is I feel like it's missing a step. I circled that, but it says 1 over n. So we need to divide by the number. In this case, we should say like the sample number. So in this case, there were 10 participants. So we're going to divide both of these numbers by 10. So I would do 64 divided by 10, 6.4. And then for the boys, I would do 10 divided by 10, and that's 1. Okay, so that's the step that's kind of missing here on the instructions. So that's one thing I don't like about the book. I mean, it's kind of saying, oh, you're just square rooting it after you do that, but it doesn't explain it very well, in my opinion. Okay, and then the last thing you do, once you have that 6.4 and that 1, now you're going to square root them, and that's going to give you your standard deviation. So let's go ahead and square root it. All right, I call the boys. What's the square root of 1? Done. It's just 1. How about the square root for the girls, or the standard deviation for the girls? What's the square root of 6.4? Anyone got that? I didn't do that part yet. All right.
40.96.
It was 4.96?
40.
Oh, it should be square root of 6.4, right? So I don't think it's going to be 40.
Is it
I got that too.
What's up?
I got 40.962. Or as well, I guess.
It's the square root of 6.4 though, right? So it should be a...
2.5?
Yeah, I got 2.5. So, yeah. So I don't know, you just do the square root of it. Oops, there we go. Yeah, 2.53, we'll say. We'll round to the nearest hundredth. So a lot of times on the IB exam, they'll ask you to round to the nearest hundredth or 2 decimal places. So, yeah, I got 2.53. I'm not sure where you guys were coming up with the 40 there.
I accidentally squared it. I thought you said
Same, me too.
Okay, sorry, yeah. So yeah, so lastly you square root each of those. That's what this is showing, the square root here. So that's what this whole thing breaks down to. So if you compare the values of the standard deviation by the mean versus the mean in each case, what can you say about the spread of the data? So I guess the first question is, really conceptually, what does the standard deviation represent? Like, what does the 1 mean? What does the 2.5 mean?
For the boys, like their scores were like around 1 like point away from each other, and for the girls it was about 2.53.
Exactly. So yes, so that's what standard deviation is. It's telling you most of the boys' scores were about 1 point plus or minus from the mean. So 6 was the mean. So most of the boys fell between 5 and 7, which if we look at their, oops, sorry, I'm moving that. If we look back over here, that's true. 9 out of 10 of them were between 5 and 7. And the girls, we got the standard deviation of 2.5 from 6. So, I mean, let's see, 2.5 is going to capture everything down to 3.5 up to 8.5. Okay, and the boys is going to capture everything from 5 to 7. I mean, or the distance of 1. So, I mean, the girls are capturing 6 out of 10. The boys are capturing 9 out of 10. So the boys' spread is a lot smaller. That's what standard deviation is telling us. How far from the mean are we? Okay. So I'll highlight that real quick. It represents our distance from the mean. And a larger standard deviation, okay, I had it written down last night, so it would give us a good definition. A larger standard deviation or a high standard deviation means the numbers are more spread out. Okay. Good. So that's where the standard deviation comes in. All right, the last thing I want to talk about on this first page is something called the IQR. We're going to use that a lot. We're going to start doing box and whisker plots next week, and we're going to use this IQR a lot. It's called the interquartile range. And, whoops, the interquartile range is, the best way to describe it is it is a, it's just finding points, it's finding a point 25% of the way through the data and a point 75% of the way through the data. Okay. Okay. Or I should say looking at the data from the 25th percentile to the 75th percentile. And we'll talk more about it, but Q1 and Q3, those are going to be like the lower bound of the interquartile range and the upper bound of the interquartile range, respectively, are found using the median technique of calculation. Okay. Versus the mean technique. So like how you find the median, that's how you're going to find Q1 and Q3 as well. That's kind of what I mean by that with the median technique. Geez, I am just really struggling here on trying to keep this straight. There we go. Okay, get out of here. Okay, so let's move us down. Okay. On page 2, the first note I have here, it just says the variance is the standard deviation squared.
I
So-
didn't get the ending of that last thing.
Oh,
So,
sorry.
like,
There you
your
go.
part is wrong.
So looking at the data from the 25th to 75th percentile, that's what the interquartile range is. And Q1 and Q3 are found using the median technique. So what I mean by that is basically if you stack your data up from smallest number to largest number, and then you find the median, which is the middle number, and then you find halfway between the beginning and the median, that's your Q1. Halfway between the end and your median, that's your Q3. That's how you find your interquartile range. That's how you find the 25th percentile number and the 75th percentile number. And we're going to do a lot of examples with that in the next week. Okay, but I'm just trying to, today just introducing the topic. Then we have variance is standard deviation squared. Variance is not something we really need to worry about too much in this course. I'm going to show you how to find that on your calculator, and that's pretty much the end of that discussion. If you guys hold on just a second, I left my calculator on my desk. I'm going to grab it real quick. You're going to need your calculators too, so grab them if you have them. Okay, so I got my calculator. It's my TI 84 Plus. You guys should have an 83 or an 84. I'm telling you, necessary for this class. So good. One of the best things about this course is for standard deviation and mean and median and mode, things like that. I'm going to scroll back up here. There's a very important note right below our standard deviation. I'm going to highlight that in black for us. It says, in examinations, you will use technology to find the standard deviation. I love that. That means we're never going to need to calculate standard deviation by hand again, which we just did. Okay, that's what we just did in the example. So I'm going to show you how to do this on the calculator. So example 3, it says, answer the following questions and in each case, interpret the meaning of the values calculated and discuss why extreme values or an extreme mode affect the mean more than the median. Okay, so problem A, we have the data. In your textbook, it was not listed from smallest to largest, but I went ahead and listed it from smallest to largest anyway for us when I wrote it down on here. But go ahead and open up your calculator. Okay, hopefully you have either the calculator or the calculator emulator. If you don't have a calculator, if you stop by school today to pick up your book, see if you can check one out from the library. I would strongly recommend that. You need a TI for this class because there's gonna be a lot of times where I'm gonna say, bust out your calculator, we're gonna do the calculations on here. Okay. So there's the stat button. You're gonna hit the stat button first. And this is explained in your textbook as well. If you guys want to write that down, I'll tell you what page it's on. Page 107 and example 5. So I'm going to write that down. Page 107, example 5, calculator instructions. The other thing you can do, use the Google machine and find out, hey, how do I put in stats in my calculator to find standard deviation? So you hit the stat button and you hit edit. And it's going to take you to this thing where it says L1, L2, L3, and those are lists. List 1s, list 2, list 3s. They should be blank or they might have data on them. But I just go ahead and type in all of my data from my list. It does not need to be in order from lowest to highest. I just need to make sure I enter every piece of information. So in this case, I'm entering 13 pieces of data. All right. So, and I can tell I'm entering 13 pieces of data too because it says L1 parentheses 14, so I know I entered all 13 in correctly, so it's a good way to double check there. Okay, but you get those entered in, and then you quit, and then you just hit the stat button again, and this time you hit calculate, and the very first button says one variable stats. And it just asks, which list would you like to select? You just say L1 because that's the list you were on. If it's never not on L1, L1's a blue button above the number 1 here, so you can always hit second and then 1. Okay, and then frequency list, we just skip, and we'll just calculate. And that's going to give us some stuff. And this is why we need to know what those symbols are, because the very first number it gives us is the mean. Bam, there's our mean. And then we can see a few bars down, it gives us the standard deviation. So really nice that we have a calculator. We can do this on our calculator from now on. We never, ever, ever need to do this by hand again. All right, that's why this class is called Applications and Interpretation. Applications means we apply the knowledge. Last year it was Analysis and Approaches was the name of the class. That means we have to look into it and say, okay, why does this work? Why does this happen? This year, we don't care why it works. We just care that it does work, and we need to know how to use it. All right, a lot better. Okay, I think application and interpretation is a lot better for that reason. Okay, so now you can write down your mean and your standard deviation. If you don't have a calculator today, what I would recommend doing is just Googling standard deviation calculator or something, and you can enter your data sets that way. But I would strongly recommend getting a calculator, especially if you are taking the IB exam. You should get a calculator. You can do everything by hand, but why when you can do it so fast on here? Okay.
Mr. Street.
Yes.
I was still putting in the numbers when you were talking about what to do after. So once I've entered all the numbers, what do I press?
Perfect. So hit the stat button again, and then go to the calculate in the middle. You scroll to the middle one, it says calculate, and the very first one says var stats or variable stats. You just hit enter on that one, and then it asks for which list. You hit list 1. Does that help, Renee, or did I go too fast?
That helped. Thank you.
Okay. And you just click through, and then it'll give you the mean. So for this first data set, I'm going to write it down because not all of you can see my calculator. The mean was 171.31. Okay. And then the standard deviation was 30.84 when I rounded to the nearest hundredth. And if I scroll down, it actually says MED on there. There's our median, 158. It also tells us what Q1 is and what Q3 is, and it tells us our min and our max. So it does all the sorting of our data for us, which is really nice. Okay. There's one thing it doesn't tell us. It doesn't tell us the mode. Dang it, we still have to calculate the mode. Stupid calculator. Okay. But we should know the mode too, right? The mode is 158 because that's just the most frequently occurring number. And since I organized them for us already, there it is. Okay. So from now on, you're just going to use a calculator to find the standard deviation and compare it with the mean. One thing I was going to ask you to do as well was I forgot to put on here, find the IQR. Okay. So I know that the Q1 is 150 and Q3 is 188.5. So what would my interquartile range be? Okay.
150 to 188.5.
Yeah, that's the IQR. What would the actual number be like if I did 188.5 minus 150? That's like your IQR.
38.5.
Exactly, that's it. So that's how you find the interquartile range. You just take Q3 minus Q1. .5. That's your interquartile range. Okay, just like how we find the range, we would say 238 minus 146 tells us the range. To find the IQR, we just do the exact same thing, except it's just with the 25th and 75th percentile numbers, okay? And the whole purpose of the interquartile range is to try and eliminate outliers. If we have some really bad outliers, the IQR tries to defeat that because it moves us in on the data set a little more and focuses on the numbers closer to the center. Okay, so parts B and C, I would like you guys to practice on your calculator. If you don't have the calculator today, a Google machine, Google standard deviation calculator. See if you can find something that works for you. I did not Google this last night. I did not think to do that while I was working on this. But yes, go ahead and work on parts B and C. I want you to write down mean, median, mode, and standard deviation and IQR. If you have any questions right now, let me know.
How do you do it? Like,
And then last one was part C. Yep, this one's the weights. I'm not sure how to enter the weights in the frequency table, but the calculator example that I found on YouTube is going to have that exact example where you're doing it with weights instead. So that will help us on the last one. I'm sure if you mess around with it, you can probably figure it out as well. But yeah, again, I didn't practice that type of problem. I felt really good about just getting the first one done, part A, and then I just kind of called it good last night. So I messed up on that part. Anyway, so that's the last of what we have today in class. I'll let you guys work on part C and watch the YouTube video to figure that out. And if we still have questions on Monday about it, we'll have it done on then. I just have exercise 3D, numbers 1 through 4 all. So that's all you have for your assignment over the weekend. And now you know how to put it in your calculator. So hopefully it goes quickly for you. It's funny because I was looking at the assignment, and the assignment's like 9 problems, and some of them are super, super long. So I just cut down to 4 for us, but hopefully it goes quick for you. Number 3 might be a little tricky, but otherwise you guys are good. So let's go ahead and get started on the assignment. We got 10 minutes left in class. Let me know if you have any questions. And, oh, it's raining. That's good. Really good. And again, make sure you pick up your textbooks today. I strongly recommend you pick them up before 2:30 because you have the advantage over sophomores there if you can, if you're not in class. Okay.
I accidentally deleted my L1 column. Do you know how to get that back?
Oh, you deleted it completely?
Yeah.
I can reset your calculator to factory settings for you, and that would add the L1 column back. I'm not sure how you deleted an entire column. That's just impressive.
Yeah, I'm kind of impressed too. I went up and then hit delete.
Oh,
So,
perfect. Yeah.
Don't do that.
Okay, yeah. So what you can do is you can hit second, and then memory is above the plus sign. So hit second, plus, and then you scroll down to 7, which is reset, and you'll just say all RAM, and then reset RAM. You just say yes, enter, enter, and it'll reset your RAM, and your stats list should be back to normal with L1 and be good to go.
Yep, it's back. Thanks.
Yep.